Most revered Swami Madhanand, distinguished participants, at the outset, we are thankful to the organizers for giving us this opportunity. With me, Mr. Sumit Pandey, who has written the paper, and we have worked together for this. The title of our paper is God as Universal Thought. Let me see now. So what we have decided is that we will read the first three sections, and then Sumit will read. So you can go on.
Full complete time. Temporary.
We are using the part of our extract as an introduction to our paper. The title of the paper is mentioned by the chair, the God as Universal Thought. In his lecture on practical Vedanta, Swami Vivekananda asserts that, quote, one manifests himself as many, unquote. One, that is God as a universal thought or pure consciousness, manifests in various forms and pervades all existence. How does one comprehend the notion of manifestation and perversiveness of God? This seems to be an epistemically challenging task. One might address this inquiry by conceptualizing God as universal thought. Following Wittgenstein, one could say that universal thought is logical and transcendental. By arguing that thought, being logical, pervades the world and also transcends the world. Wittgenstein presents a similar view to Vivekananda on God. Thought as a logical picture of the world permeates all facts in the universe. Since thought pervades all reality, it can be comprehended through through the faculty of understanding and reason. Thus, the thought is thinkable and thereby comprehensible. One can also assert that God as a universal thought is thinkable. It corroborates with René Descartes' elucidation of thought as awareness, where thinking is identified with understanding, willing, imagining, and experiencing. Hence, thought is thinkable and is experienceable. Given the profundity of human consciousness and the intent of the voice of experience, it could be said that the beautiful words of Bhagavad Gita, which invokes this mode of experiencing as seeing, quote, he who sees me everywhere and sees all in me, I am lost to him, nor he is lost to me, unquote. The seeing is not merely a sensuous experience, but also is grounded in reason. This unfolds the possibility of experiencing God as a universal thought, both in epistemic and normative point of views. The first section of the paper, God as universal thought. In the history of modernity, John Locke, refutation of Descartes' notion of innate ideas had a direct bearing on the existence of God and self. Locke's refutation, moreover, put these ideas in the realm of the psychological. The concept of God is psychologically developed. God thereby becomes necessarily a causative being, and God is conceivable, and thereby the rationality of his existence depends on certain psycho-sociological conditions. God, therefore, according to Locke, is not a universal idea. Can existence of God only be conceptualized in the realm of psychological? Descartes although maintains the knowledge of God to be an innate idea, still one could see his aspiration for a perfect being cannot be derived from the world. We cannot be derived from the world, and we cannot conceive God's perfection. Rather, he writes, God is presented to me as I am presented to myself, clearly and distinctly. He further states that, quote, in truth, when I think only of God, I discover in myself no cause of error or falsehood, unquote. The error and falsehood in which God is conceived is confined to the realm of the psychological is problematic. The truth concerning God's existence is necessary and eternal. It is only in the light of pure thought, as Hegel mentions, God's existence is manifested. For Hegel, God is absolute truth, is not mere an abstract universal, but is a thought concerning the ultimate existence manifest in the divine consciousness. In the realm of divine consciousness, God is an infinite, need not be juxtaposed with the finite, which was in a sense conceptualized in the Cartesian framework. Rather, the true infinite must therefore include the finite so that the divine encompasses the entire universe. The presence of the divine or being there in the realm of the divine consciousness shows that universe is divinized. In this regard, the God is the source of everything and everything exists in him. This existence is in an order, as Wittgenstein writes, how things stand is God. God is how things stand, unquote. This divinization and the normative order in the universe has been construed as pantheism. The concept of pantheism maintains that God is all pervading. Everything is the manifestation of God, and God transcends everything. Such a conception of God can be traced in the philosophy of Vivekananda. In his lecture on practical Vedanta, he writes, we quote, all is one which manifests itself either as thought or life or soul or body, and the difference is only in degree. Vivekananda further writes, all your actions will be magnified, transformed, defied by the very power of thought. If if matter is powerful, thought is omnipotent. Unquote. We would here like to draw your attention to Swamiji's notion of God as thought. The thought holds supreme power over actions and material reality as a source of transformation and elevation. While matter possesses this divine force, thought is treated as omnipotent, shaping existence and directing reality. Thus, thought is everything that precedes all forms of existence. Such a conception of thought is inseparable from the divine consciousness. As Sri Ramakrishna states, she, quote, she showed me everything was divine consciousness. The image of was consciousness. The altar was consciousness. The water vessels were consciousness. The door sill was consciousness. And the marble door was consciousness. All was consciousness. Unquote. Everything is consciousness. Vivekananda also wrote in the similar line that everything in the universe is simply the manifestation of that cosmic intelligence, or as we call it henceforth, the supreme Lord. Everything that we see, feel, or hear, the whole universe is his creation, or to be wrote, or to be more accurate, is the Lord himself. Following this position, one suggests the divinity pervades all existence. According to Swami Madhanand, this position of Vivekananda can be termed as the metaphysics of pantheistic cosmopsychism that maintains the sole reality is divine consciousness, which manifests as everything in the universe. In other words, God is a divine consciousness and universal thought that manifests in everything. Swami Madhanand's approach to cosmopsychism as a solution to the hard problem of consciousness. The second section, the divine consciousness must be experienced in the experiential form. There is always a subject-object dualism, but experiencing the divine transcends this dualism. One might also say that such an experience is subjective and phenomenal. It is subjective while being experienced by a person, whereas its phenomenality refers to the qualia or subjective experience. While describing the phenomenal experience, subjectivity is presupposed. Is this subjective experience only psychological? Can divine experience be reduced to the realm of psychology? Psychology explains experience in terms of neural processes of the brain. Consciousness is caused by the neural process of the brain. Such a theory of consciousness is naturalistic, which sometimes explains away subjectivity. However, those who adhere to the thesis of subjective experiences are merely psychological and irreducible to the neural function. For them, subjectivity raises a hard problem of consciousness. Subjectivity has been an issue that has challenged many philosophers. Swami Madhvanand has responded to this problem of subjectivity in his most inspiring work titled Swami Vivekananda's Vedantic Cosmopolitanism, which we saw today. Swami Madhvanand brings to us, by following Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda, that the realm of the psychological has certain limitations. No doubt, the psychological causes the sense of subjectivity, and it is confined to antakarana. In general terms, the function of antakarana is causal as well as intentional. It is causal when we try to transcend, when we try to understand it from the viewpoint of the material condition of the brain processes, whereas it is intentional where the desires, beliefs are directed towards the world. If the intentionality is believed to be solely originating from antakarana, considering the metaphysics of Sankhya, then it is Prakriti, which is the ultimate ontological ground for the psychological experience. This conception is problematic as it does not clarify how physical is the cause of the subjective experience or the psychological. Accepting this thesis, one might adhere to the naturalistic conception of the intentional experience and thereby may fail to treat the problem of dualism seriously, or may fail into the framework, or may fall into the framework of reductionism. To resolve this problem, Swami Madhvananda advocates a reconciled view of Sankhya and Advaita, where he argues that the constituents of antakarana function causally but appears conscious because the reflection of Purusha, the universal consciousness. Now one may ask how one cosmic consciousness gives rise to many individual subjective perspectives. According to Swami Madhvanand, Vivekananda builds on Sankhya but moves towards Advaita Vedanta, where the cosmic consciousness is the source of the individual minds. He brings the notion of Maya, where we perceive this subject object duality or manyness due to the illusory projection. We can take the example of waves and the ocean, where the waves seem different from the ocean, but ultimately they are both same. Thus, the problem of combining micro experiences vanishes, as there is only one fundamental consciousness appearing as many through self-limitation, not diffusion. Hence, everything emerges from the singular cosmic consciousness, which primates and transcends the universe. To, to say that everything is consciousness, including rocks and rivers, implies that they can have conscious experience. Identifying this problem as incredulous stare, Swami Madhvanand replies that the consciousness cannot be attributed to insentient objects like rocks, but only to entities that um, entities with subtle mind, antakarana, capable of reflecting divine consciousness. The third section, the manifestation of divine consciousness and contemporary debates. The problem of incredulous stare appears in a different form with the advent of cognitive science, since Alan Turing onwards, where there has been a slogan that machine can think, and nowadays the use of chat GPT shows machine can no longer pose an incredulous stare, rather can interact intelligently. Can we not encounter a hard problem of consciousness that manifests in the intelligent expression of the machines? Daniel Dennett and recently Anil Seth maintain that an artificial system can consciously behave and act intentionally after surpassing some threshold level of intelligence. In his recent book, Being You, Anil says writes, we quote, "It is quite common, though by no means universal, to think that consciousness will emerge naturally once machines pass some as yet unknown threshold of intelligence." Such a conception of consciousness maintains emergentism. John Searle refutes this conception of emergentism, stating that no artificial systems can ever understand because they are syntactically regulated rather than having semantic ability. Understanding requires real consciousness, whereas machines will have as if form of consciousness. In short, Searle's refutation of emergentism, which entails reductionism, and it's strongly committed to eliminativism. Chalmers, in Reality Plus, also argues that it is absurd to hold that such a machine can have conscious experience after surpassing a level of intelligence. However, he poses another hard case of emergentism when a system can have antakarana by creating a perfect simulation of the human brain. That would result in showing how the system can consciously interact with the world. To address this hard case of emergentism, the simulation theory of Antakarana, we would like to draw your attention to the evolutionary theory of mind mentioned by Swami Vivekananda. According to him, the basic stage of evolution starts with the matter, similar to the case of seeds germinating and becoming a tree. The seed manifests the form of the tree, is a genuine case of emergentism. In the case of evolution of a human, Vivekananda wrote, we quote, "We see then that this human being is composed first of this external covering, the body, secondly, the finer body consisting of mind, intellect, and egoism," unquote. Following this notion of manifestation of life in different forms, one could see further the notion of evolution advocated by Sri Aurobindo. Unlike Vivekananda, Sri Aurobindo explicitly discusses the evolution of mind. Madhvanand concedes these two viewpoints of Aurobindo and Vivekananda. Illustrating this, Professor R.C. Pradhan argues that such a conception of evolution can be attributed to Vedantin as well as to Neo-Vedantin. He writes, we quote, "There is an evolutionary trajectory of the manifestation of consciousness such that we can identify grades of manifestation of consciousness in matter, life, mind, and supermind, as Sri Aurobindo has elaborately argued," unquote. The first two primary evolution are matter and life. Two types of objects have evolved at this time, matter with life and matter without life. For Pradhan, the mind evolves at the latest phase after the matter and the life. It is because, we quote, "life is a creative process marching towards a higher form, especially as giving rise to the mind. Mind is implicitly present in life," unquote. By arguing that mind is implicitly present in life, one can argue that even scientists make a mind from matter, but it will not be like the real mind. The real mind or antakarana can only evolve out of material life, where emergentism will have as a form of antakarana, and to have the divine conscious experience will be a higher sense of manifestation of consciousness. The consciousness transcends the realm of antakarana, the psychological.
We have 10 minutes left.
Thank you.
So the fourth section of the paper is Swami Medhanand and the problem of reconciliation. So although Swami Medhanand reconciles although Swami Medhanand reconciles the Sankhyan and Advaitic notions of the consciousness to address this contemporary debates, there are still some problems while reconciling them. Its reconciliation thesis explored the concept of multiplicity in Purusa, the conception of two absolutes, Prakriti and Purus, Prakriti serving as the ultimate cause of reality. Following Swami Vivekananda, he resolved all these problems. However, he has not discussed the concept of the phenomenal self or the notion of jiva that appears in Advaita Vedanta and Sankhya. Jiva in Advaita Vedanta and the phenomenal ego in Sankhya are different. According to Sankhya, the phenomenal ego, identical to Antakarna, consciously experiences the world, and the buddhi gives a subjective meaning and feeling. Considering their dual function, K.C. Bhattacharya points out that the mind is illusory, referred to as empirical self in Sankhya. He also states that the buddhi assumes the form of things present in its vicinity, but also projects its own subjective states. Following Sankhya, one can posit that it is the material buddhi that projects its subjective experience to the object, to the world. Therefore, Sankhya gives primacy to Antakarna, which is the manifestation of Prakriti or the matter that subjectively experiences the world. Or one can also argue that subjective experiences emerge from the material. This theory of emergence is not committed to reductionism. In contrast, Advaita Vedanta holds that the jiva consciously experiences the world, which is essentially indistinguishable from Brahman or the absolute. However, the jiva erroneously identifies itself with the body, mind, and senses due to avidya or ignorance. It perceives, illumines, performs, and derives pleasure due to avidya, as Purushottam Bilimori explains. The Brahman Chaitanya associated with the subjective self in the subjective aspect may be assumed to be the third light of analogous to that used in a studio to illumine the objects to be photographed. And the Antakarna can be compared to the negative or film in the camera, which transforms as light enters through the lens and accordingly registers the shape, color, and so forth of the object focused upon. Quote. Here Advaita brings the notion of Antakarna from Sankhya, as rightly pointed out by Swami Medhanand, but they consider that the jiva, as Swarup of Brahma Chaitanya, with an intentionality, experience the world, as also argued by R. Balasubramanian. Advaita gives primacy to ignorant jiva or intentional consciousness identical to Brahma, which subjectively experiences the world after falsely identifying a subject-object duality. Now, the fifth section of the paper is universal thought, a transcendental term. Here, we'll try to resolve this conflict between Advaita and Sankhya from the viewpoint of transcendental idealism. As how Tang rightly argued, it is characteristic of transcendental idealism to give an important role to the subject in its account of reality. For an idealist, the subject is the limit of the world. Following this, Wittgenstein's Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus presents an important insight into transcendental idealism. He differentiates between the psychological I and metaphysical I. It suggests that the metaphysical I is not the part of the world, rather the limit of the world. In his text Culture and Value, Wittgenstein makes this clear by arguing that thought has such a way, so I believe it as though it flies above the world and it lives it as it is observing it from the air. It in flight, quote ends. It implies the presence of a subject as a universal thought which constitutes the world as well as transcendence. This duality is central to transcendental idealism, which parallels Vivekananda's metaphysical stance. Similar to transcendentalist position of Wittgenstein, Vivekananda explains the universe as a projection or manifestation of the universal consciousness or thought, which he calls God or Brahman. That is pure existence, Sat, pure consciousness, Chit, and pure bliss, Anand. Everything experienced, form, name, sensation is an expression of this infinite, transcendent reality. Now one can raise a question regarding the nature of the individual self in Vivekananda. In Karma Yoga, Vivekananda responds to this by distinguishing between the little self and the great self. The little self, bound by limitation of worldly understanding and perception, experiences the world as fragmented. In a sense, the limited self is an intentional consciousness, but the great self, once awakened, sees through the illusion and recognizes its unity with Brahman. The journey of spiritual realization is the setting of this mistaken identity. It reveals the universal self behind the veil of individuality. It shows that the little self is the same as the great self. As argued earlier, the empirical self is identical and derived from the pure self, which experiences the world. But one can ask how these experiences are possible. Kant already raised this problem. In relation to this, Mohanty Rao wrote, what is the transcendental argument in this context? It must show that ordinary intentional consciousness presupposes pure consciousness. But how the argument run? Mohanty observed that transcendental philosophy must show that ordinary experience will presuppose a pure non-empirical consciousness. Vivekananda offered precisely such an account in Practical Vedanta as he wrote, all our action, all your action will be magnified, transformed, defied by the very power of thought. If matter is powerful, thought is omnipotent. Bring this thought to bear upon your life. Fill yourself with the thought of your almightiness, your majesty, and your glory. He emphasized that universal thought of Brahma is omnipotent. Thought in his view is not merely a mental activity, but a metaphysical force that manifests and determines reality. This recalls Kant's idea that the condition for the possibility of experience are not empirical, but transcendental categories of thought, and the unity of sense makes experience intelligible. So, drawing all these insights from Vivekananda's transcendental idealism, one can argue that the phenomenal self, which is Jiva, an ignorant form of the metaphysical self, can only subjectively experience the world. As Vivekananda also wrote, the mind, Vivekananda quote, the mind too is only the carrier. It has to carry the sensation still forward and present it to the intellect. The intellect is the determining faculty and decide upon what is brought to it. Still, this is not sufficient. But for Sang, this is sufficient. The intellect must carry it forward and present the whole thing before the ruler in the body, the human soul. So the king on the throne. To the structure of consciousness, according to Vivekananda, consists of multiple layers where the self that consciously experiences the sensory data avails from the Antakarna. It is the self, essentially Brahman, in individualized form that gives the final directive. In this sense, the self also transcends the realm of the psychological. One need to focus here that Vivekananda emphasizes it is the Jiva, not merely Antakarna, that truly experiences, unlike Sankhya, which prioritize the later. Therefore, a transcendental idealist reading of Vivekananda can better explain the identity between the metaphysical self and the empirical self, and how the empirical self can understand reality.
Many thanks for your universal thoughts on